we're at AWA, we're running a cohort program, which is it's agile coaching, which has an element of professional coaching in it. It's a sort of 6 to 7 month cohort program. It's an IC Agile expert level course. There's only about a week and a half before it starts. So if you're interested in that, do get in touch. You can either get in touch with me, or there's training at adventureswithagile.com, and I can give you that through the chat if you're interested. So if you do want to join or be part of the cohort program to go really deep into the whole agile coaching, professional coaching, facilitation side of it, then do get in touch, because there's a week or so left before it begins, and there are a few places left. So now I would like to introduce Myles. So I haven't known Myles for very long, but I've known his work for a very long time. First of all, I'll sort of introduce his work, and then be more of a personal introduction. So Myles's work has really been a massive influence, not only to me, but I think to the whole professional coaching industry. And whether you are aware of his work or not, I'm pretty sure that the work that you are aware of, different authors and different schools that you've come across, have probably been influenced by some of Myles' work at some point. So you can be pretty sure that that in some way your understanding has been shaped by Myles. I don't know exactly how many books you have, Myles. Three books. And so basically, fantastic author. Definitely recommend his books. And I know that there's another book coming out later in the year. Is that right?
Yes, which is part of what we're talking about today.
Yeah, fantastic. So watch out for that as well. And then in terms of introducing Myles, we spoke must be probably 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah.
And immediately through that connection, the moment we were on, obviously with Zoom, couldn't meet in person, unfortunately, at this point. But just really, just the moment we're on that call, I just felt this deep grounding connection, this sort of real depth of person, a real character, which I felt was someone I really wanted to spend time with and learn from. And I feel absolutely honoured to have somebody who has spent such an amount of time, who's worked not only on this industry, but clearly just from the interactions I have, I'd be so presumptuous to say that I consider obviously done an enormous amount of work on yourself as well. And to have you here tonight is a massive privilege. And I know from the last time that you were here on an AWA meetup, a subject which I consider that I know a lot about, I learned a hell of a lot from the last meetup with you. So thank you for that. And thank you for being so generous to be here to share your knowledge and the work that you've done. So thank you for that. And now I'll hand over to you for the main event of what we're here for. So thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for joining in, to everybody else for coming along, and I hope I don't disappoint. So the last conversation we had was about kind of coaching, and I kind of styled it as a craft to try and get that sense of this is something, coaching is something that you work at, you improve, it's a skill, was the heart of that. And of course, one of the things that is sometimes even hotly debated, which is, should managers coach? But there's no question in my mind that a central part of a manager's role is to coach the people around them. So that's, and I've been training managers for something like 30 years, even more actually, to do that. And I guess what's that history in itself is kind of interesting, because boy, is it difficult. It's like, that we are so embedded in a culture of command and control, and so risk averse in so many of our organizations, that the notion that you might coach somebody and that they might go off and do something that they thought out for themselves is just horrific. And add to that the notion that I might have to change the way I behave towards people. I mean, in a risk-averse culture, take it away. So, but I think one of the things that's interesting is that things have changed quite considerably. in the world of work and in the attitudes of people coming into the workplace, that the need, the attitudes, the mindset has changed, and there is now, if not today, then certainly overnight, or maybe just tomorrow, there is that opportunity to start talking about coaching as part of what a manager does. So the kind of the strap line is from command and control to align and enable. And within that, I'll talk about 3 skills specifically: lead, manage, coach. I used to say leadership, management, and coaching, and I'm not just trying to save airtime by shorting it. I want them to be verbs, things you do, past.
Hi. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Is there any chance we can have this session recorded, just so we have a...
That's great. Yeah, we're recording it, right, Simon?
Okay.
Oh yeah, I was on mute.
Yeah.
Yes, we are recording. No worries, this will be recorded.
All right, thank you very much. Sorry about that. Apologies.
No problem.
Shut up now.
Good, thank you. So if you have questions or observations, please don't feel that you can't interrupt me. So it will not occur to me as an interruption. So if you have got something you want to, that's occurred to you, or you want to say, I mean, clearly, we've got the part of the game is for me to get my message across. But equally, if you can add or help make specific or clarify, or if I've said something that doesn't make sense, please jump in, ask a question. So frankly, I enjoy it. It adds spice and air to the whole proceedings. So command and control to what I'm calling align and enable, lead, manage, coach, and I'll take you through the argument that gets you there. I'm going to repeat some things that are so much out in the world that you can't, it feels difficult to say them, but I've got to say them just to make sure they're on the page. And that's principally about setting up a context for a conversation. At a certain point, I'm going to cut into my slides. I'm trying to avoid going into the slides because they stagnate the conversation a little bit. So I'm going to leave that to the last possible moment. There'll be time for questions, I think, at the end. Certainly that's the plan. And the set of slides is tight. So happy to send them out through Simon and the team and your team at the end. So we can do all of those things. So getting back to kind of the structure of what I'm going to speak about is some context that sets up why there's a need to change from command and control to align and enable. I'm going to look at two different kinds of organizations that maybe point the way a bit for what might change, and that will take me into my proposition about what an align and enable looks like, and I'll get quite specific about that, and I'll end up, with any luck, tying all of that into flow. So flow being the state in which we perform to our best, because that kind of makes a neat package of the whole thing. So that the things that you know is that we're living in a fairly daft world, VUCA, called by some people volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, compounded by ever-increasing speed of change and interdependence across organizations or parts of organizations. So the world has changed, requires speed, responsiveness in a way that we didn't need it in the past. And another thing that's significant in the whole conversation, as I said, about mindsets changing, is that, that kind of we're at the point where about 50% of the workforce is composed of millennials. And I'll have something to say about that, because there's something there that's interesting that's going on there that's interesting. The idea that attitudes have shifted and changed. And then what you can't avoid in all of this is that we have created for ourselves a culture of compliance. And that culture, you can argue with me about this, but just let me get through it and make the point, and then we can disagree or agree. And that culture is held in place by institutions of state, of education. Education is really not education anymore. It really is about training people to jump through hoops, which is profoundly dull and really doesn't help when people get through life. And then other institutions, church, all of these things at a certain level are, I won't say designed, intended maybe, to keep us in our place. And And of course, management practice is much the same. And I'll say some words kind of, as it were, on the next slide about making that much more specific about how that happens. And of course, that culture pervades our workplace, the culture of compliance in which we are complicit. We allow this damn thing to happen. Stifles creativity, voluntary contribution, self-efficacy, which of course the new world demands. So we're in this big contradictory state. And of course, equally, millennials don't understand that quite. They kind of say, why is this person who's older than me telling me what to do, or how to do it? It just doesn't quite add up. So that the approach to management, the approach to leadership just is increasingly not working. And it certainly doesn't conform to what we're trying to do with agile approaches to business. I mean, they're completely at odds. Command and control and agile just doesn't work. So part of the problem has been that there's no agreement really about what we might do that's different. So, we've had organizations that have tried to create coaching cultures. Just be clear, that's daft. You really don't want people coaching all the time. They need leadership, they need direction, they need being held to account. It's much less, it's much more obvious than that. It's really about performance, and coaching is part of that. But a coaching culture is in itself not a good idea. So that's the space in which I'm kind of opening up. And then what to be specific about some of that, somebody coined a term a while back, and I can't trace down who it was. Fordism. So after Henry Ford. So we kind of have created, there's a history across our businesses for the last 100 years, which is about ever increasing efficiency. And Henry Ford started that with his line management processes. And then you get on the back of that later. And it's interesting how these different phases start coming in quicker and quicker and quicker. You get total quality management. Then a little bit after that, you begin to get business process re-engineering. You get Six Sigma. You get and lean manufacturing. And by the time you get to Six Sigma and lean, what's clear is we know how to do efficiency. We can make millions of products and have just one of them fail. Or it's just like we know how to do efficiency. So the first question is, where do we go now? And agile is part of the answer about where we go now. But the other thing that comes out of that is problematic, is that we've applied those same principles of efficiency to all kinds of other places, to our performance management systems. They're run on the same kind of principles. Lots of education run on the same kind of principles. Talent management systems that say, this is what talent looks like in our organization. That's daft. You end up with lots of men sitting on boards in companies, all of the same color. It doesn't work. It really doesn't work. And then you get to competencies. I mean, that's the craziest thing in the world. That you can say that these are the competencies somebody requires when human beings are so much richer. So you just train people in the competencies. That's not a route to agile, I would suggest. It's not a rule to productive, creative, responsive organizations. So that's kind of where we started from. And part of part of that story is, you look at what's happening at the moment with millennials, and if you read the press, the press is negative. These millennials, they're difficult to attract, impossible to retain. They're impossible to manage is the other story that goes around them. They're a threat to corporate culture, and and the worst stories are they're disengaged, easily distracted, demanding. With a kind of a sense of entitlement. That's part of the story. But if you get beyond that story and you start looking for what millennials are really asking for, there's a possibility that what we're at is some kind of inflection point where those guys are pointing the way, because what they're asking for is for his work that has meaning and for purpose. They're asking for empowerment, the right to get on with the job and not be disrupted by people who think they know better telling them what to do. They're asking for development and growth. They're asking for a path to promotion. They're asking, or at least career development. And they're asking for simple things like to work, when and where they want. Interestingly, that's kind of now a happening thing. So the suggestion there is that actually that millennials may be pointing the way. They may be suggesting that there are other ways of thinking about the way we set ourselves up for work that are more conducive to learning, performance, development, and just sheer enjoyment and engagement. So with that in mind, I've been running a model around lead, manage, coach and teaching that for many years with some success. But I started saying, hold on, that's your experience, Myles. That's all well and good. Where else could you look for some validation? And after a little bit of thinking and talking and whatever else, 2 organizations stood up that actually do things differently. And they stand out because there's a profound need in both these all kinds of organizations to take care of the people in a different way. And one of them is the military. So it's very clear that the military needs to look after its people, have them be high performing, because there's a kind of an organizational cost, and there's a human cost if you get that wrong. But another place that you get that same thing is in mature startups. So when I talk about a startup, I'm not talking about somebody in a garage who's had a good idea. We're at a point with startups where the successful startups are typically run by, it is true, it's men who are 45 years old. That's typical. And they're typically on their 3rd startup. So what's interesting about that is that they've learned how to do it. So there's almost like an emerging discipline around doing a startup, which we could call, for want of a better expression, entrepreneurial mindset. And I've actually been working on a program to teach that on a mobile learning platform. And it's going down incredibly well. But what both those organizations, military and not all parts of the military, let me be clear about that. It's particularly those parts of the military that are in dangerous situations frequently that do more of this than others. It's what they've understood is that you can't expect people to act quickly, decisively, learn, use their talents, develop them in an environment that's hugely constrained and controlled. It just doesn't work. And I have to read this line because I'll lose it. Is what they've really got to is they've understood how to reconcile the kind of conflicting needs of how to provide sufficient control around people so that we know what they're doing and know that it adds up to a result for the organization, with letting them loose to go and doing it. So it's the empowerment piece that's meaningful, and what you find is that if I develop that a little bit more in the military, and particularly in the US, they've put a huge amount of work into what they call mission command. And the idea there is that it combines a powerful vision or an intent that is communicated to everybody in the squad or whatever it is. And then you got decentralized leadership. So the thinking is that once people have that clarity, they can make their own decisions. That also requires trust. So the human relationship is now even stronger in the whole, it brought much more into the equation, because you can't do that without trust. And that kind of, that environment allows people to make decisions quickly, to act within governing constraints. That's all understood. And if you look at an example in a startup situation and entrepreneurial mindset, one of the principles perhaps of entrepreneurial mindset is the idea that what I've heard called objective-driven execution. What it looks like in practice is the person who's leading the team will frequently stop with people and ask them what the primary objective of the organization is at this moment, because it shifts as you pivot and change and respond to the environment and the world, and ask them how their work aligns with that overarching objective. So it's clarity about that and the alignment with the individual. So you're getting in both these places thoughtfulness about how you shift that around. And here I'm going to slip into a slide or two by something of a synopsis, is 4 kind of critical elements that come out of that was not where I wanted to go. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, I've just gone back. Well, that's what I was saying about entrepreneurial mindset. And Andy Gove, who's the CEO of Intel a good while back, was make mistakes faster, which was a good indicator of an entrepreneurial mindset, because that's where the learning happens. So bringing those two things together, there's in both situations, military and startups, mature startups, a clarity of vision or intent, that the action is aligned with the primary objective, that there's decentralized leadership so people can get on with it, and then it's all founded on trust. And I'm going to put these words in here. They won't entirely make sense right now, but what that talks to, they'll make sense in a minute, which is that's the overarching why. That's the what that somebody does, their role and their goals and their tasks. That's got something about the how something gets done, and then the trust is about an underpinning relationship, and all of those things will come up as I take you into what I mean by align and enable. So that's back to those 4 points that I was making. Then the intent behind the slide was to draw some to draw some of the principles out of the situation with mission command and entrepreneurial mindset. And I linked those with these words here. So you can still see this, Simon?
Yes, we're all good.
Okay, thank you. So some distinctions before I go into the actual model itself. So lead, manage, coach as verbs is about leadership in action. So in other words, you can read books that are quite theoretical about leadership, and that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm really talking about what happens on the shop floor. So it does this by ensuring that there's a clear context to act within. So that's the why. Yeah. That's the overarching vision. That individuals and teams have clarity about what. That means what is expected of them, and that the word align there is because it's the alignment between the why and the what that makes the difference. And then it also ensures they have clarity about how they are doing something. And just very quickly, I'll come back to that. If you didn't know why why your job was important, that would be significantly demotivating. If you didn't have clarity about what was expected of you, you can't succeed. And if you don't know how to do it, well, you're even in deeper trouble than that. And the consequence of that model is that you push out decision-making, and then you get responsiveness, you get accountability alongside it. What I said earlier, no, I'll do that in a different route. So what I've got here is lead, manage, coach. And that's about the leadership. The lead piece is about why, the management piece is about the what, and the coaching is about the how. And then the relationship at the bottom that supports it all. And I'm making the case that all of those three things need to be present. So whereas I'm pitching this in the context of these are the key elements of an enabling leader or enabling manager's role, I'm also knowing that some of us here are primarily coaches. My experience is most people have no real solid practical model about how they execute their jobs as manager stroke leader. They don't have any distinctions around that. And that's really not very helpful for the poor people. I have a wonderful stepdaughter. She's now 37, I think, and she has a very significant job managing a large number of people. And I recently asked her, and she's been through Honda, British Rail, and is now with a major retailing outfit. I said, has anybody actually trained you to manage your team for performance? And she just looked at me and said, no. So it's like, right, you're 37, you've been in business for more than 10 years and you haven't had very simple training. So it's kind of, so as a coach, I frequently find myself taking people through this. And here's what I mean by some of these things. So lead, this is about making sure that team members understand the why behind the what they're doing and therefore, and how they can contribute the organization's goals. So if I understand that, If I understand that and I'm cut off from my commanding officer, I can make decisions. If I understand that and I'm working at home, I can make decisions. I can act. If I don't understand it, I end up second guessing. And in second guessing, I generate interference, and I probably don't make the best call that I could have made. So that's the first part. What does it look like? Well, it's about providing perspective on the purpose and goals of the business or the part of the business that you're in. It's about context and meaning for the team member. So that's another point of alignment, that if the individual team member can see something in the vision or mission that they can buy into, then that's a significant part of engagement. And as I'm sorry, connects the team members' aims with that of the business, and the benefits of obviously engaged, purposeful, better decisions. And this is I've adapted this from the mobile learning platform that I mentioned, because we've got this up there, and as a means of getting this out to we have I think about 4,000 people working on this in one client in China right now, where everybody across the organization is getting the same training. The impact is just unreal. So that's lead, manage. When they understand the why, then you agree with them about the what. And those activities are about agreeing about role, goals, tasks, and priorities. And there's a verb there, which is agree. So that's much more powerful than being told. Quality, standards, and expectations, and we're back. So quality, standard, and expectations are, that this is, these are the standards to which we do things here. So in the startup that I'm in, we strive to be right first time. And that's also kind of, there's an interesting tension between that and another one we have, which is that, mistakes are permissible as long as they're taken as learning opportunities. But those kind of expectations are made clear. Benefits, clear focus and mandate. Useful to have a mandate. Understand the scope of the work and the constraints, so what I'm to do but what I'm not to do. So once the why and the what are in place, then it becomes possible to talk about the how. Team leader helps members find their own way forward, not tell them what to do. So we were deep into this last time we spoke. Make their own decisions, not solve their problems. Take full responsibility, not direct them. So benefits, clarity on decisions, ownership of their actions, team members learn and grow. So if you think about it, particularly in the balance between the manage and the coach section, or circles, sorry, of my model, is the biggest in trying to train people in coaching. The biggest problem was the fear of losing control. And what this model solves, as they have done in startups and as they have done with Mission Command, is by holding manage and coach side by side. I define what it is you're going to do. I provide some governing constraints. We have an expectation around standards. These are clear and explicit. And then within that, we have a conversation about how you're going to do it. Then that's how you get the best of both worlds. You get the appropriate control, or in this case, I'm using the word alignment, and the alignment happens between at two levels. It happens between the task and the goals that I've got and their alignment with the overarching objective of the business or part of the business I'm in. And with any luck, the alignment is also between the organization and the individual. So my motivation, my aims, my aspirations find some home within those of the organization itself. So you get the alignment piece between organization and individual, and between the why and the what, and then the enabling piece you get through the coaching. And what that then generates, let me just say one more thing about the coaching, which I think is fun to go into. Fun in the sense of useful and productive for us. As I try and move this one on, here's an analogy. And what I'm hoping you're seeing is a picture of a tennis court, and we've got a player, and then we've got an umpire. Interestingly, in this one, you won't find the opponent. I find tennis matches without an opponent much easier to win, is what's behind that. But we do have a coach. And you'll notice that the color coding matches what I was saying about the green for coaching and for how the blue for manage and the blue for leadership and the red for umpire for the manage activities. So where I'm taking this is that when you stand on a tennis court, you sign up to play in a certain game by a certain set of rules. In a sense, when you join an organization, you set up to play in that organization's game by that organization's rules. So you're making a commitment right from the get-go. And most people do that without actually fully understanding what the organization's game is and what the rules are, but we kind of get by. The umpire's job is critical in this, because in the tennis match, their job is primarily to, are you seeing that?
Yes.
So the configuration on my screen keeps changing, which is why I'm asking. The umpire is responsible for managing the rules of the game. That's what their job is there. They don't keep the score anymore. That's all done by some guy with a computer at the side of the court who pumps in the numbers and they come up on a big screen. The primary thing is to uphold the rules, the ethics of the sport, the game. And in a sense, that's the what. I stand on the court, I sign up to a certain game. That's the what. And the umpire is responsible for maintaining those standards. And that means that there's a certain kind of relationship between me and between the player and the manager. And that's why it's in red. The umpire has the final call. In the same way, when as the leader or manager in defining the role or goals of the team member, that they have the final say is about what those goals and roles are. And that's where the holding to account comes from. So this is a relationship that has a certain kind of power in it, and it's different from the relationship that comes from the coach. So what I'm trying to draw attention to here is that managing and coaching are fundamentally different in terms of where the power sits. When I'm managing, I have the final say. The authority sits with me. When I'm coaching, the authority sits with the player. They get to choose how they do something for the most part. And that's where the enablement comes in. When I'm doing it in the way that I choose because it best suits my skills and abilities. And because if I've envisaged it, I'm much more likely to be able to act it out. If I've been told it, I'm much more likely to forget what it is. If I get sent across the road to the small little shop by the petrol station and Joe tells me to buy a number of things, I'm likely to forget one of them. But if I'm cooking supper and I know what supper is and I'm making it, I don't forget. It's an entirely different dynamic. Consequence. Umpire has authority around the what. Oh, we've gone too far, one less. And how the player has the authority. That sets up a very interesting dynamic and two different. And here's the thing that crowned this for me as having something more than my own experience and the development of that model with friends and colleagues and looking into mission command and entrepreneurial mindset. There's a wonderful psychological discipline that called psychosynthesis, and it was developed by a guy called Assagioli, an Italian. He was just after Freud. He hit his particular stride, and he's a much more humanistic approach than Freud had. And one of his notions was he characterized as love and will. So he was saying that love and will are two fundamental human dynamics, and you'll notice that they're in particular colors here. Again, color coding is key. So there's those two things, and initially they get presented to you when people talk about it or teach this stuff as if they're in some kind of contention or there's a duality here, and we need to get. I'll show how we get beyond that in a second. So what's will? Well, will, according to Assagioli, is essentially a masculine energy. That doesn't mean that it has a gender itself. In a biological sense, and it equally doesn't mean that it's the sole preserve of men. It's will is about control. It's about structure. It's those are two great words that kind of, and then love, on the other hand, is a more feminine energy or drive. If one is about control, this is about trust. It's about process rather than structure, about letting things happen. And if you characterize those in kind of the parent-child relationship, you can have parents who are overly willful, and that ends up being bullying, and that's not helpful. And you can have parents who are not willful enough. My daughter, whom I mentioned earlier, she's my stepdaughter. And as when we kind of, the three of us, my wife, myself, and Vicky got together, for a long while, I didn't understand what my role was or what my responsibilities were. And thank God I had a good psychotherapist that helped me be really clear that I had a responsibility. So there was a period where nobody was really putting boundaries around Vicky, which really didn't help her. She wasn't very happy. And she and I were kind of beginning to bicker a bit. And once I got it that we needed to provide more boundaries, the relationship between Vicky and myself changed almost overnight. It was really remarkable. And it wasn't draconian, it was just clarity. On the other hand, you have love. Obviously a relationship without love leads to the demise of the other person in one way or more. But overly loving equally doesn't help. If the parent picking up their child from school and the child is in tears and they said, this or that happened, and the parent then says, don't worry, Johnny, I'll take it up with the teacher tomorrow. Now there's an opportunity lost for a child to take responsibility. So you can be overly loving. So how did Assagioli get away from that? Well, he said you transcend, that means you move up a level and you include. So you embrace both of those will and love, those dynamics. So anytime there's a duality, transcend and include. And he got to this word, presence or wisdom. So from detaching yourself a little, looking at the scenario, you make a better call in which you may either deploy love or will, depending on what the need is. And if you then take this back into my model, what you find is, if the clicks go through, lead, manage, coach, that there's, so what I'm suggesting here is that behind this is a fundamental dynamic of human beings, that there needs to be, these elements need to be placed, the balance between love and will, the balance between control and empowerment, the balance which is align and enable. And that is held together by the presence and wisdom that is about leading. And that's how those three things play out. And my final bit, so we've got a few minutes to take any questions, is, some of you who were there last time will know that part of what gets me interested is something called The Inner Game, which was a book written by Tim Galway. And he had this wonderful idea. Clearly, performance is not equal to potential. This is what makes sense of it, minus interference. So if I, as I hinted earlier, if I'm a team member and I don't know why my role is significant or how it contributes, that's an interference. If I don't have really great clarity about what my role is and what the expectations are, that's an interference. And by the way, I've noticed time and time again that people have some sense of what their role and their goals are, but goals are seldom well defined. So that it's a bigger interference than we might think. And if I don't know how to get on with it, if I haven't been coached or pointed in the right direction, that's another interference. So flip that on its head. If I have clarity about the why, the what, and the how, many of the conditions that Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi identified around the state that he christened flow, so the state in which of optimal performance, are met. So actually, by getting this right with your team members, what you do is you create a state of flow for them, or you help them, you contribute significantly towards a state of flow for them. And just Daniel Goleman, who you'll know his work of emotional intelligence, he wrote a really great book, Focus, The Hidden Driver of Excellence. I truly recommend it. Flow is a state of self-forgetfulness, the opposite of rumination and worry. People in flow exhibit a masterful control of what they are doing. People perform at their best in flow. And And we're seeing, more and more that that's the state where people either individually or collectively get the results in things like, in places where the shit can really hit the fan. Startups and the military, where you're working under extreme conditions. So that's the big bit of what I wanted to say. I'm going to stop screen sharing, if my system will allow me to do that. And
I can help you start.
So that's my pitch. Command and control to align and enable.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Myles. And I know that there are people who have questions and things. And I know that Yaz wanted to ask a question a second ago. So Yaz, would you like to ask Myles your question now?
Yeah, sure. Well, a couple of things. The how bit. At what level are you kind of pitching it? Because you spoke earlier on about competencies and how they're kind of very divisive, but I do see competencies as a significant part of the how to do stuff. But yeah, if a developer doesn't know how to develop and the test analyst doesn't know how to test, no matter how aligned they are to the process, they're pretty much useless to me. Yeah. The other thing, I think that how you kind of apply, the whole sort of idea that you're putting across really kind of depends on understanding the particular individual that you're trying to apply it to in the context of a team. Because, I've worked with onshore development teams and offshore development teams. And one of the things that I've noticed about offshore development teams is this whole sort of cultural idea, or the sort of cultural element where, I am being told what they are expecting me to want to hear from them. Whereas in fact, the reality seems to be something other than that. And, it took me a long time to kind of get those people, the offshore developers, to a point where I can actually trust, the whole love part of it, trust what they're telling me. So I can, I can ask a question, get a response from it, and be happy with that, not have to kind of overly monitor it because I've got other people to deal with. By the way, I'm a scrum master, not exactly a coach, but coaching is a big part of what I do.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll shut up now.
No, it's great. No, and you've said some important things, and so I think, and of course, what I was saying, there was a certain amount of flippancy around the observations about competencies, and yes, people need to know their profession and their craft, and they need the training in which to do it. So you started with kind of distinctions around what kind of coaching. So clearly, when I'm as a manager, the coaching that I do of my team is very different to the coaching that I do when I'm a professional coach. So my license is quite different. So when I'm coaching a member of my team, my coaching tends to focus very much on helping them understand, helping them grasp something, help them think through how they're going to deliver a specific task or a goal, helping them think through how they might do something better, helping them think through how they might learn something. But the boundaries are much clearer. I don't stray into areas of that are personal to them. So I may have a conversation about their attitude, but I might well do that from the management side rather than from trying to coach them on it, because of the dangers of straying into their personal lives. So it constricts what you can coach people on. The second part of what you're speaking, I think there's probably a lot more to say than we've got time for. But one of the places where we did a lot of work around coaching, which has some relevance, is that in some large petroleum companies, we worked with the people who are responsible for safety, and the intention there was to create a culture that wasn't driven by rules and regulations, but was actually driven by a lot of coaching. And that led to the engagement of, and some of that was very specifically around, these are the expectations we have around safety. How do you stack up, and how are you going to improve on the specific one? So it became quite structured. But what was interesting was how transformational it was. So people weren't then kind of looking around the oil rigs or the drills, waiting to, keeping an eye out for the safety officer and then hiding when they saw one coming. The safety officers began to get included in the team. And it took a while to build the confidence on both sides that you could actually do that. And a while was anywhere between almost instant to 6 months, depending on the individual.
Thank you. Has anybody else got a question for Myles? Feel free to either put it in the chat, or if you're feeling brave, feel free just to speak out. Come off mute though, because otherwise we'll be like, you're on mute again.
I've got a question. Myles, in your picture of the tennis court, where you had the umpire and the coach, and you were talking about the authority sitting with the player for the how, I think. And yeah, and the question that I had was just, given that the authority sits in different places, either with the umpire or the player, there is still the word responsible sitting with the coach, even though they don't have the authority in that space. And the question that I just had was around the word responsible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I need to do some editing.
Okay.
And the thing that yes, it's ultimately it's the player's responsibility, and actually at professional levels, the player is employing the coach, which is entertaining, because it completely disrupts that balance. The point that I was trying to make there, and in retrospect, and thinking back, I didn't make it well, was that the game may be a given, the what, but how I play it isn't. So I'm a left-handed person. My nature is to be quite a risk taker. I look for fluency, I look for speed. So my tennis is incredibly aggressive, but that's my choice. It's a function of how I see myself, my identity, and that's how I express my identity. Many years ago, my darling mother, who happened to play Wimbledon in the 50s, we were having I think it was just something like her 80th birthday, and she was in London. We're a Dublin-based crew. She was in London for that event, and I was sitting beside her at a dinner. And I said, why did you never watch me play tennis? It was like, this was a large part of my life and a large part of her life. You said, well, I couldn't bear to see you hit the cover off the ball. It's like, what? So my mother would scurry around the back of the court and scoop everything back and drive everybody to complete fecking distraction. And that's how she won tennis matches. Somebody said she could do that, and she took their word for it, and she did. But crikey, I couldn't do that. So the how is with your own gift. That was I didn't make that message clearly enough, and you spotted that thing. That it is in your own gift, and this is where I finish. The word. Well, unless there's another question. What's really interesting is that word authority. My younger brother is a classic scholar and a lawyer, and I occasionally, when I bump into a word that kind of piques my interest, I ring him up and say, tell me about that word. So I was writing the first book on coaching, and I said, I'm using this word authority, and I realized I don't understand it. What does it mean? He said, well, it goes back to of course, to octum. And I said, yeah, of course. It was just like, what does octum mean? And he said, well, it means to cause to grow or to produce. So what? Because people's view of authority is something quite different, something darker. He said, yeah, it's the same root as the word author. And that was when the light went on. See, the writer writes their own book. I do a deal with my manager, the editor. So this is the shape of the book, this is the number of words, this is what it's about. And he holds me to account to that. But he doesn't sit there over my shoulder and every time I start typing, say, oh, no, you can't say that. That's not how it works. And yet that's how we do management.
Yeah.
So there's a, and I'm glad you spotted that. The responsibility clearly sits with the individual, and the joy of authority is that actually it comes from within. It's about what you create, and if the environment is right and you can bring that to work, shit happens.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and I love the way you called out authority on the previous talk you gave. It really resonated there as well. Yeah, I like that origin story. Thank you for answering the question.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Myles. So, Christina, you have a question for Myles.
Yeah, I do have a question. Thanks for the talk, Myles. So I think my question is just around in terms of, I agree with you about the coaching culture, and maybe that's not the approach for an organization, but I wanted to get a view from you in terms of the command and control and moving towards aligning and enabling your team. Do you think, how effective is it in terms of coaching leadership to getting to that point where they go, the why is important to, I'd like to say like the little worker bee. And that's kind of the reason why, you know, as you mentioned, millennials, they're a kind of different breed because they're focused on the why. Yeah. So my question is, from a coaching perspective, do you think leadership is really always engaged to get to that point where they're expressing the why clearly to their management?
No, I'm with you entirely, because implicitly you don't think that. I'm guessing.
Yeah, I know.
No, and there's a massive way to move, and it's, you know, the work we've been doing in China has been really interesting, because it's you know, the degree to which we're not doing these things well in the UK, in the parts of Europe that I'm familiar with. You move into China. I do a lot of work in Russia, and they're just beginning to get a glimmer of it. Just beginning, but you see how crippling it is that you know, you don't tell people stuff, you just don't, and it's weird and difficult to understand. But there is a shift. If I look at my daughter, she's 37, she's got a really quite senior position. She'll probably move up at least one more level in that organization, which will be kind of close to C-suite or C-suite. And if I look at her and her peers, they understand that. I hear Vic sometimes when not recently, because she hasn't been at home so much recently, but I might hear her on the phone speaking to a team member, and her tone is so different to anything that I would have heard when I was her age 30 years ago. And I think that's what's important. You know, millennials are now moving into significant management positions. The worst thing will be is that you know, the sins of the fathers, that they do unto others what was done to them, because that's the model that they have. That would be the worst thing. And of course we'll see that, but there is a shift, and those people have a different relationship with others and a different perception of the world.
Okay.
I'm hopeful.
Yeah, no, I get it. I think it probably comes back to, I can't remember where it was, where somebody said that if you haven't gotten the leadership that you want, you either need to become a leader for others, who you've kind of like lending your voice to help others. And yeah.
Okay, that's nice. That's nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you. I have a quick one, and then I guess we're probably getting close to the end. So I don't know if this is an observation or a question. I haven't quite decided yet. I was thinking what you said about mature startups. Typical would be a male around about 45. And I was thinking about my own business in the sense that it's probably getting to be a mature startup. And I'm 47, so I'm 2 years too late than the average probably. But that was my observation. But what got me thinking was that so this idea of vision and needing and understanding the why. What is the why? Now that's very, very built into my business. It's very, because I hold that why, because I started this business up because I'm passionate about the why. But when and our business is obviously going and helping leaders. That's one part of our business. And in bigger organizations, what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of managing going on, even at the C-suite level. There's very little leading going on, because it seems that many organizations have lost their sense of why. And all that's left when you haven't got a why is more doing, more managing. And then when you've got more managing, that managing has to take up the space somewhere. And so it takes up into the how. It leaks into the how somehow, until you've got managers all the way down the chain telling everybody what to do, which is your command and control, which is this thing. So one of the things that we do is we try to bring back this outcome-based strategic sort of thinking to get back into the why. Why are we doing this? And it just made me think that maybe this is one of the key issues of losing this why as companies grow bigger. And I just wondered if, that's why I said I wasn't sure this is a question or observation. I wonder if you have anything to say around that, or.
It just rings true. Yes, that's exactly it. And it's interesting to, maybe not now, but another time, to think about what is it that has so screwed us up that we can't have conversations about leadership and vision, and we can't have that permeate down through the organization.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? So Myles, there's a couple more hands up. Are you okay, or do we call it a day? Sure. We've had quite a few questions now.
I've got another couple of minutes, yeah.
Okay, all right. So we'll have. I think we've got Wolfgang, good friend of mine. Hi, Wolfgang. Would you like to ask Myles your question?
Yes. Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Myles. I really enjoyed your talk. Here's just further on this discussion. I just recently had a bit of a chat with a former colleague in a German company. I will not name them, substantial company. And we were having exactly this discussion, how do we change leadership and whatnot? And he gave me an example of where we're struggling. So there has been this whole push of trying to really generate a younger average of the workforce, right? By obviously changing teams and evolving and whatnot. And what happens, the idea was that will actually break some of these rhythms, some of these, maybe obstacles, right? To innovate and to give the millennials more of a chance. What turns out, his observation anyway, is that you always have a couple of folks with kind of like the residual knowledge and behaviors and whatnot that now feel, oh, actually my like-minded or aged competition is gone. So it's really now my rules of the road, right? So the younger guys are even more kind of like, subject to my rules of the road, right? So how do you break that? And I mean, my response to him was, we really have to start talking about unlearning before we can learn something new. Do you have any thoughts, any ideas, how to deal with that?
The truth is that I don't have much, because I've not really found ways of systematically working it. The times I've been successful at creating helping people create a performance environment have been when I've been able to work with the person at the top. So in one of our big broadcasters here, not the BBC, another one, I worked with the marketing director, who's very enlightened and very intelligent, very wise. And so I started coaching him, and he then started saying, okay, he said, I need to get my team to step up and pull the guys. So he had a strategic reason to make a change, not just what was in his heart. And what we did was we ran sessions on site where I trained him and his direct reports, all senior people, to coach each other. And we did short interventions. So, I think gone are the days where you do kind of immersive 2-day events. What we did, we did 2-hour events. I taught them something, I demonstrated it, I got them to practice it, and I got them to practice it with their teams. 2 weeks later, we met up again, and we did that. We had a rhythm of doing that. We were due to do 4, we ended up doing 5 because they were enjoying it. Then they took the notes off me, and those guys teamed up and they ran at the next level down. And the last I heard was they were still running it within that part of the organization. And that was the place where it made a change, because the senior team, all of them falling into that millennial bracket, except for the marketing director, were completely committed to this. And strategically, business sense, personally, everything. And it was, and I've repeated that, not quite so dramatically, but a number of times. But unless you get the hearts and minds, as we know,
it's not working.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Not a great something.
So I think that's probably what we've got time for. Thank you, Myles. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all of these different things, the models, the wisdom, all of the things that you've shared today. Thank you so much. So big round of applause. Thank you. I don't know if we can do that virtually or not. Probably we're all on mute, but I'm imagining we're all clapping. Thank you. Was there any closing things you would like to say, or?
No, a simple thank you for being here, and even being here beyond a lot of the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Take care, and we will see you all on the next AWA meetup.